Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and recently I had a funny thought about Star Trek Discovery. You know how often I complained about things not making any sense and being illogical in the show, and often even the upside down of what would make sense is what happens, and especially with the characters, the way that everything is literally in reverse of logic. For example, Michael was raised by Vulcans, and yet she's the most emotional person ever and cannot hold back her tears. She constantly cries about every little thing, even though she was raised by Vulcans in the Vulcan way. And Tilly is the heaviest person on the ship, and yet she's the one who always wins all the marathons. And Adira started out as a soldier in the Earth Defense Forces and was totally confident. Then she got the memories of her previous trill hosts and then became totally insecure and a shy little inexperienced person without any confidence. And so literally the opposite of what makes sense is what happens. And then it occurred to me that this show would make a lot more sense if we actually reverse the flow of time. If everything happens backwards, then everything will suddenly make perfect sense. For example, if Tilly starts out as fat, then she runs a bunch of marathons, and then she becomes thin like she was in the first season. Then it will make perfect sense. And if Adira starts out as an insecure, shy person and then gets the thrill memories, and then becomes totally confident and experienced and a badass who serves in the Earth Defense Force. And if Michael starts out as an overly emotional person who keeps crying all the time and then goes to study under the Vulcans to learn some self control, then it will make total sense. And even the ship itself, one of the problems in the show is that the ship is overpowered, especially in the first two seasons when it was a prequel set before all the other shows. And yet they had the most powerful ship ever, and then they classified it for absolutely no logical reason. It will make so much more sense if the ship actually started out in the future and then traveled to the past, and that will explain why it's the most advanced ship in the fleet and why it has all the holograms and all the technology that no other ship had at that time. If they simply started out in the future and then went to the past, then that will explain why their ship is the most powerful ever with all the holograms and other things that no one else had, and the Red Angel suit, if it came from the future, it will explain why it seems like magic in the past. And the ship's computer being sentient will make sense if the ship is from the distant future and it traveled to the past. And with Michael's character development, the way she was promoted despite doing a lot of bad decisions. But if we reverse the flow of time and she starts out as a Starfleet captain, then makes a lot of bad decisions, like needlessly risking her ship and crew, violating the Prime Directive, starting wars, betraying other captains, would explain why she keeps getting demoted more and more until eventually she's thrown into a prison, and maybe she gets a pardon for good behavior, but only if she agrees to go into a Vulcan school and learn to control her emotions. And that's why in the end of her story she'll be studying under Vulcans to suppress her volatile emotional state. Also, regarding her relationship with Book, it will make sense if they start out as a couple, then after he betrays her to try to commit genocide against that 10C species, then they break up, then he gets kicked out of Starfleet, then he becomes a courier and a criminal. Also will make much more sense than the way they showed it. And because the ship came from the far future, that's why they have to classify it in the past. Maybe Starfleet wants to use it to help win the Klingon War. And as for the Klingons, you know how silly it was that they look totally different without any hair. And then later in season 2 they suddenly gave them hair and tried to explain that they all were shaving their hair because they were at a time of war and Klingons don't have hair in a time of war, which doesn't fit the rest of the Star Trek universe. And Worf even said that the Klingons view their beards as a sign of courage and all of that, and so it made no sense. But if we reverse the flow of time, then we can explain that the Klingons only shaved all their hair because they lost the war. And out of shame of having to stop the war, that's why they all had to collectively shave all their hair as a species. Then that also will make much more sense. And the character of Ash Tyler also didn't make any sense because he started out as that Klingon Vok, who then transformed himself into a human to infiltrate Starfleet, and that plan totally backfired because he didn't do anything for his own species. He only ended up basically betraying them, joining the other side. So that plan made no sense, and he eventually joined Section 31. Why would Section 31 trust the Klingon to be the leader of Section 31, it makes absolutely no sense. But if we reverse the flow of time, and he starts out as a Section 31 agent who then transforms himself into a Klingon to spy on the Klingons, then it will make perfect sense. And so he starts out as a Section 31 guy who impersonates an unknown Klingon named Vok, who looks a little bit different, and he excuses it by being an albino and all of that. And so that's why all the Klingons think he looks weird, and they don't realize it's because he's actually a human pretending to be a Klingon. Then he manages to become the right-hand man of Takuvma, while actually working for Section 31. So things will make much more sense if that was the case, you know. Since when do the Klingons resort to such sneaky tactics? It's kind of against the Klingon way. But if it was a Section 31 guy doing that, then it makes perfect sense. Maybe then he falls in love with that Klingon woman and so on. So it will make so much more sense if it was all the other way around. And if it ends with Michael being demoted and thrown in jail, she gets pardoned, but only if she agrees to attend the Vulcan school to learn how to control her feelings. And as for the character of Grey, who probably has the most convoluted storyline ever, because she starts out as a Trill host, who then gets killed, her symbiote gets transferred to Adira, then Grey becomes like an imaginary friend in Adira's mind, then becomes a hologram, then they transfer that hologram to a robot body which suddenly has pimples for some reason. So all of that was so convoluted. But if we reverse the flow of time, then Grey started out as an advanced robot who had pimples to look more human maybe, and then that robot gets damaged, and then they salvage it and it becomes a hologram, which then possesses Adira, then becomes Adira's imaginary friend, then becomes part of the Trill symbiote, and then gets transferred into its own host body. Then I guess it still makes no sense. It's still kind of too convoluted. But anyway, most of these ideas, I think it's kind of funny that because this show was so illogical, the things literally made more sense upside down. If we reverse the flow of time, suddenly it feels much more logical and makes much more sense. And so that's kind of a quick thought I had to share it in a video. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss it in the comments below. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.